So dating all the way back to the XS Max, back when Apple debuted a new larger kind of Pro Max version of iPhones, I always gravitated towards the larger iPhones, bigger battery size, larger displays, and it usually meant that we got some sort of better feature, whether it was a better camera system overall, or maybe some sort of internal feature upgrade that the regular Pro didn't have. But this year, I actually decided to go with the 17 Pro size, and it's completely changed how I use my iPhone on a day-to-day basis, and it's also amazing that you're not giving up any functionality aside from the display and the battery. So here's my long-term review of the 17 Pro and Pro Max and why I decided to go full in on the 17 Pro this year. Let's get into it. But now, before we continue, if you do enjoy videos like this one where we cover all things Apple, both from a hardware and software perspective, consider subscribing to the channel. But now let's talk about why I switched over to the 17 Pro size versus the Pro Max size. So as I mentioned earlier, Apple started to introduce the Pro Max size back with the 11 Pro Max. They did have the XS Max as well as the 8 Plus and the 7 Plus versions, but we truly got that Pro Max version when the iPhone 11 series did come out. And ever since then, I was that person that would gravitate to the Pro Max size because I always wanted at least a larger display. That's what always gravitated me towards that. And then of course, the bigger phone meant bigger battery. But then also Apple decided to put a couple extra features into the camera systems back then, and they continued on with that all the way up to the iPhone 15 lineup, where we got a better telephoto lens in that triple camera array, we got better features overall, and there was just a little bit more. For example, ProRes footage. Also, another example is the fact that the lower end Pro model always started with less gigs of storage versus the baseline version of the Pro Max model. So there was always something you were giving up when you were going down to the Pro model, and I thought to myself, let me just go all in and go with the Pro Max model. But now these Pro Max phones are getting extremely large from a screen display standpoint as well as from a form factor standpoint. So right now the 17 Pro Max is 6.9 inches diagonally, and as somebody who has pretty normal hands, it gets a little bit hard to start reaching for those corners, especially if you're somebody that consistently likes to go into your control center, he likes to swipe down to get your notifications, and just needs to be able to kind of reach over to the other end of the phone. Even just reaching over horizontally to the other side of the phone with my thumb, I have to do some kind of hand gymnastics to really get to that point of the phone. Again, that really depends on hand size and how you hold your phone, and I know that there's accessories out there like a finger loop to make it a little bit easier to wield with one hand, but it definitely got a little bit uncomfortable and tedious over time. So I thought to myself that maybe this year I'll decide to go with the 17 Pro because for all intents and purposes, these phones are finally identical. You're not giving up anything whatsoever when you are talking about the 17 Pro Max versus the 17 Pro from a feature standpoint. So again, the camera systems are exactly the same, the displays are exactly the same, the baseline storages are now exactly the same with these two phones. The only difference is going to be literally the screen size going from 6.3 to 6.9, and then the battery capacity and battery size in terms of being able to fit more battery into these phones. But now, again, all these phones, aside from that, are completely identical. The only difference is if you do want to get the most amount of storage in one of these phones, you do have to go with the 17 Pro Max version, and that does cap out at 2 terabytes versus the 17 Pro version caps out at 1 terabyte. That is the only difference and only kind of upgrade that you get with the 17 Pro Max this year. But that'll cost you an arm and a leg, about $2,000 to get a 2 terabyte iPhone 17 Pro Max. And now while I am going to be talking about why I'm deciding to go with the 17 Pro, this is also just an overall review of both of these phones and how they've held up for the past month of me using these phones, because they have been amazing and they have been relatively easy to use, and everything that I've kind of thrown at these phones, they've been handled and handling it perfectly well. But let's first quickly talk about the ergonomics, especially of the 17 Pro, as well as the design language. So Apple did change up the look, especially of the rear of these phones with that new camera plateau that they like to call. And from an ergonomic standpoint, I actually really like this. So first off, design-wise, Apple decided to go with a unibody aluminum design, which does make it a little bit heavier compared to titanium, but what they were able to do with this is they actually rounded off the corners ever so slightly more, making it feel like the phone is actually thinner and much smaller in the hand. Now again, at first I started off with the 17 Pro Max and then went to the 17 Pro, but you can feel the difference. If I held up the 17 Pro Max versus the 16 Pro Max, the 16 Pro Max, because those edges are a little bit more squared off, does feel a little bit heavier, even though it is technically lighter and harder to wield. So the 17 Pro Max is easier to wield than its predecessor, meaning that of course, so is a 17 Pro. But then a nice little kind of secondary feature of the camera plateau, aside from, again, putting all the internals in there, is the new lip that the camera plateau gives you. So before, when you only had the triple camera array going on the top left-hand corner, it was kind of just stuck there and it didn't really serve a purpose. But now the camera plateau is kind of like a mini finger grip on the rear of it. You kind of rest your pointer finger and your index finger on there on both of these phones, and it gives you just a little bit more confidence when you are holding this phone, especially if you are holding it without a case. I know that most people do put cases on these things, but if you do want to show off that cosmic orange color and show it off in all its glory, being able to have it caseless and being able to kind of feel more confident holding this phone because you have that little lip you can kind of rest on has been nice to have. So a nice little secondary feature of the camera plateau. And then again, going back to ergonomics of the 17 Pro, it is just so easy to use one-handed. I'm able to reach all the way across with my thumb. I don't have to kind of perform those same hand gymnastics that I had to do before with the Pro Max size model, so I can reach every single corner very easily. I'm really enjoying the size of the 17 Pro over the 17 Pro Max. Now, there could be recency bias as well, as somebody who's been using the larger phone for years and kind of moving over to 17 Pro, but I just want to make it known that it is very easy to wield, and even typing and using swipe to type one-handed is light years easier than it is on the 17 Pro Max. And now let's talk about performance of these phones, because the performance has been on another level. Now, normally year over year, when Apple goes from a 15 Pro to a 16 Pro, they tell you, you get 10% performance boost and you get a 20% GPU boost, and the multi-core score goes up a little bit. But this is the first time in a long time that year over year we're getting a substantial upgrade, and that's because of two things. Of course, you have the A19 Pro chip in there, which is built to handle a lot more. They actually added some extra internal RAM as well to handle all the Apple Intelligence features. But a byproduct of adding more RAM into these phones is that things are just going to run smoother, run snappier, and you'll be able to do more in the background than you were before. So for instance, with the 16 Pro Max, my applications would always restart in the back and they would refresh in the background without me wanting it to do that. So I would maybe open up a YouTube video, leave there, go to another app, maybe go to two different apps. I would go back to that YouTube application and the YouTube app would refresh because the RAM management was just not on par with what it needed to be in order to keep that YouTube video or that YouTube application in the same instance that it was. And that would happen with a lot of different applications, with certain games and things like that. So overall, the A19 Pro is able to handle a ton more when it comes to the RAM management and when it comes to multitasking in the background. And then another thing that Apple added that is going to be a huge benefit to the 17 Pro and Pro Max versus the older phones is that they added a cooling mechanism with their vapor chamber. I really did not think this would add much of a difference, but the 16 Pro Max, my 16 Pro Max would get so hot to the touch when it was charging, when it was out in sunlight, when I was doing just a little bit too much on it, it would just get very warm and hot to the touch, to the point where I had to put the phone down every now and again, especially during the summertime. So far, this 17 Pro and the Pro Max has been amazing from a performance standpoint. I haven't had the dimming screen, even though sometimes it does get warm when you're charging at that 25 watts of MagSafe speed, or maybe I'm playing a task-intensive game, or I'm doing a little bit more, you do feel it warm up just a tad, but it's not nearly as hot as it was with the iPhone 16 Pro, and that really kind of boosts performance overall, and it gives you that confidence that you can kind of throw anything at these iPhones and it be able to handle that, because again, Apple with the vapor chamber, the A19 Pro, the extra RAM, the better management, is promising a 50% boost overall in performance year to year, which is something that we really haven't seen on a year-to-year basis when upgrading these iPhones. So if you are coming from a 16 model or a 16 Pro, you will see substantial differences in gains of performance with the 17 Pro and Pro Max. And then I do quickly want to talk about the camera, because again, Apple is best in class when it comes to these camera systems, and again, the 17 Pro and Pro Max have identical camera systems. They do have that triple camera array, and Apple is talking about that they have a million different focal lengths and 3 cameras, but at the end of the day, what you need to know here is that they're all now 48 megapixels, which is an amazing thing to have, so you have much less differentiation in quality when you are going from the ultra wide to the macro and telephoto and things like that. So whenever you are zooming in and you go from that 0.9 range to the 1, you see a little shift, and in that shift is not only a shift physically because you're moving from camera to camera from a location standpoint on the rear of the phone, but you also see a shift in quality in the older phones. This year, there's much less, if not any, shift in quality when it comes from going from the ultra wide to the wide, and then again to the telephoto. And then technically the 4x telephoto is a quote-unquote downgrade because you're going from a 5x telephoto to a 4x telephoto, but you are dealing with a 48 megapixel telephoto versus the 12 megapixel from last year. So technically it is an upgrade, because if you crop into the center 12 megapixels, you're now at 8x telephoto, which is the way that Apple's doing it is kind of like a fusion telephoto optical-like zoom, even though it is still technically cropping. But just know that the 8x telephoto zoom camera is great and you get great quality pictures, especially if you have some decent lighting. And then to coincide with that, the size of the 17 Pro just makes it much easier to wield when I am kind of running and shooting, when I am using one-handed mode, when I am taking pictures, when I am using the selfie mode, which is another great upgrade, which I think every single manufacturer is going to copy moving forward, which is going to be the new center stage camera on the front that both of these, if not all the iPhone 17s have, including the iPhone Air, which is going to be that square camera sensor. So what they did this year is, with a 24 megapixel square camera sensor, they now allow you to take a landscape or portrait orientation photo even though you're holding the camera in regular vertical orientation. The end result is going to be an 18 megapixel selfie shot, both in landscape and vertical mode or portrait orientation. And they also add some smarts in there, so it has auto detect features. Of course, you can manually change the orientation if you want to, but it'll follow you from a center stage camera standpoint, but it'll also open up into a wide angle, into a horizontal orientation while you're holding it vertically if it senses that there's more than one person in the shot, or if you need to have a little bit more of a field of view overall. So the center stage camera is something that every single Android phone is going to copy moving forward, mark my words. And then last but not least, which was my biggest worry, is going to be battery life. When I went from the 17 Pro Max to the 17 Pro, again, you're dealing with a physically smaller battery, so in theory, it should be worse at battery overall. But the combination of the A19 Pro chip, the new vapor cooling chamber, and just the way that Apple's been managing everything and adding more efficiency, I got 10 hours of screen on time and I was still at 7% battery at the end of the day. On the 17 Pro. I started off the day at around 6:20 in the morning and then put it at the charger at around 9:40 p.m. And yes, I kind of went overboard and tested it as much as I can. I don't normally spend 10 hours on my phone on a daily basis, but I wanted to see how far I could push it before putting it on the charger for the first time. And like I said, I got 10 hours of screen on time on the 17 Pro. And the Pro Max gives you a little bit more as well, so the 17 Pro Max battery life is a little bit better, but the 17 Pro battery life is light years better than the battery life I had on my 16 Pro Max, because towards the end of the life of the 16 Pro Max, which again is only a year old, I was only getting about 6 hours of screen on time, and that's because it was overheating, the titanium wasn't built correctly to handle all the cooling that it needed to handle. So the combination of the vapor chamber as well as the new A19 Pro chip, the RAM management, and everything that comes with the iPhone 17 Pro means that you're getting 10 hours of screen on time, which should be more than enough for anybody using this phone. And I was using the 17 Pro to take photos, to watch videos, to take videos, to obviously iMessage, to Slack, to do a bunch of my normal day-to-day things, and I handled it with no problem, and at no point did it overheat, which is something that I could not say about the 16 Pro Max. So my overall consensus of the 17 Pro and Pro Max is that yes, again, this is Apple's best and baddest iPhone lineup that they've had to date. And again, they threw the kitchen sink at it, but what I like to kind of emphasize here is that this is by far the best one that they've made. Versus last year, it was just incrementally a little bit better. They didn't change much. Same with the year before and the year before. This one just feels like the most pro model iPhone that I've ever used because it can do everything that you could ever throw at it and then some, and it can handle it very easily. Again, it's still early days. We're only about a month into using these phones on a daily basis, but overall, I'm very happy with the product that Apple put out this year. And while, yes, maybe when you finally install everything from the front, it doesn't feel as different as it did with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, overall, it is a substantial upgrade from a camera situation, from a hardware, from an internals, from a spec update, and just from an overall usability standpoint. And I do think you're going to get a long lifespan with these phones. This phone will easily last you 5 years, if not more, especially if you take care of it. And I'm just happy with the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max lineup, but I will be sticking to the iPhone 17 Pro as my main phone moving forward for the rest of the year because I love the form factor, I love the size, the reachability, the usability, the one-handed nature of it, and not having to really kind of do the hand gymnastics to get to where I need to get to on the phone whenever I need to get to with one hand. But that'll do it for this video, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below what you think. Which model did you pick up? Are you a 17 Pro, Pro Max person, or even dating back to older phones? Do you normally go to the Pro version, or do you go to the Pro Max version because it's a larger display and you usually got some additional features that came alongside of it? I always like to know your thoughts, but if you did make it to the end, I'm going to begrudgingly tell you guys to leave a dolphin in the comments down below. My dolphins are terrible, but still, if you made it to the end, I'd like to know. And if you guys want to watch more videos like this one, check out one of these videos right here. I have a video coming out about my favorite accessories for the 17 Pro, so leave some down below of maybe some that I should check out and pick up to maybe add to that video. But that'll do it, everybody. Until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace. 17 Pro for the win.